Okay, so we changed things up a little bit this week. We decided to move the podcast studio from my house around to Powell's. Like all things new, a new experience like this is going to put up new little challenges, like the lady next door tenderising her meat about 25 minutes into the podcast, or Powell's great-looking housemate coming in and opening beers halfway through the podcast, or just Powell opening a beers which spills over the table midway through the podcast. So between all of those little incidents, there's some great conversation here as well, but please forgive me for the extra sound effects in the background. It really doesn't take up much of the podcast, but I just didn't want it to be that elephant in the room when you hear it in those random moments today. Okay, so I tried to ignore it. I think I mentioned the tenderising of the meat, but I just listened back to it, and it's quite clearly there. The meat sounded as though it would have been delicious. She tenderised it for about 2 or 3 minutes. Anyway, Pally and I catch up and chat about tribes. What we mean is teams, support groups, families, the people that we surround ourselves with in a culture with, where we are in London, in a society, in a city that has so many people. It's amazing how many people feel quite lonely. We wanted to talk about a book by Sebastian Junger called Tribes, and just venture down this path into the health benefits and just the personal benefits that come with surrounding yourself with people and having a purpose, being able to implement your skills and your strategies and whatever it is that you bring to a team. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed as much as I did, and I'm not going to say too much more because Pally does a beautiful job introducing the podcast once we start. So let me get out of your way and introduce myself and Matty Powell.
I'm the soul challenger, I'm the road damager. Now behold the cold and the straight magical. Cause the sky brings fires and the strong grow weary. The heroes built blood in the blast and the fury. Pray on the power and pray to your father. Cause all of the quakes in the universe resonate to your heartbeat and your faith.
You need to go as hard as the first one.
Yeah. Oh, that was nice.
Welcome to your kitchen, brother.
Thanks, mate. What's happening?
I'm sweating like an absolute legend. 7-hour walk to your house.
Like a midget in a urinal.
That's exactly what it's like.
Nice one.
I left my house about, honestly, probably an hour 45 ago.
Yeah.
By now.
Yeah.
And I said to Jesse, I'm a human GPS.
Yeah, the human GPS.
Oh, because I made up that term a little while ago.
Uh-huh.
And I said to Jesse, I'll be there in 45 minutes. I've got my phone, but honestly, I thought I'm just going to find it myself. And I got halfway here and realised I've got no idea where I'm at.
Yeah.
I just
Stoke Newton Post Office.
saw your big rig standing out your front window.
On Babe Alert.
On Babe Alert.
Friday afternoon on
You
Church
can't
Street.
be on Babe Alert anymore.
Come on, bud.
You're a married
Don't
man.
bury me like this.
Married man.
No comment.
Can't believe it.
No comment.
Bro,
Alright, just chill.
You've changed so much since you turned 30.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Yeah, cheers, pal.
Rig City's
Yeah,
dead.
Yeah, cheers, pal. Anyway, what's going on?
Man,
Welcome to the kitchen.
it's so nice to be in a separate kitchen to the rest of the house.
Yeah.
I forgot people had these anymore.
Hashtag studio kitchen.
Man.
Worldwide.
Yeah, that's right.
Something like that.
What's happened with you?
Yeah, mate, not much. Like I told you, I'm just bowling medium pace at the moment. Just line and length, just gentle little dibbly dobblies outside off stump.
What does that even
going
mean?
through to the keeper.
What does it
at
mean?
about 85 kilometres an hour, mate.
You're just going nice
Just
and
gentle.
easy.
Just gentle. Gentle medium pace.
Is that Matty Powell 4 weeks out from the end of term?
100%, mate.
Oh, what happens at the
I'm
end
just
of term?
conserving energy. Well, then I'm going to bring out the new ball. And I'm going to come out hard, mate. Just throw in a few chin music, a few bounces. People right now are just going to be like, what is going on?
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah, sorry,
But
mate.
I appreciate the fact that you got 4 weeks left and I think you're just saying you're really tired.
Just taking it easy, mate. Just taking it easy.
Man, anyway.
I think that's a good philosophy, maybe, for life.
Yeah, it seems to be a good one. I want to handball the introduction to this conversation over to you because you're the one who introduced me to the whole theme, and I reckon there's so many good little chunks of wisdom that come out of this conversation that I've found just in researching it this week.
Yeah.
That I hadn't even known about or thought about or really even considered. So, tribes is the topic of conversation. Can you just, before we start breaking down what the heck we're talking about, do you just want to lead us in with a little introduction?
All right, I'll try my best. Mate. You just help me out here. All right, so yeah, I guess the topic is tribe, and to put in context, I'm not talking about caveman or tribalism and hunting and gathering and a little bit of violence, all that sort of stuff. I guess putting it in the framework of like community, family, sort of a common purpose, a common goal, and that's the whole idea of tribe. So the idea for the podcast, I guess, stems from one book in particular, but then there's a whole bunch of other ideas that culminate into the whole theme of tribe. And that was from the book called Tribe by Sebastian Junger, which he was on Joe Rogan's podcast the other week. And it came out, I think, maybe 2 years ago, and it's a pretty cool little book. It's not necessarily, the most amazing book ever, but it's just like a really cool, interesting little concept. And so the fundamental premise of the book is based on his experience. He spends a year in Afghanistan with a platoon based out in the mountains at like this really dangerous post called Restrepo. And there's a documentary on the whole experience as well, that him and his colleague, who actually unfortunately passed away recently, I think in Libya maybe, as a war journalist. Anyway, they put this documentary together and he ends up writing this book. And the whole idea of the book is that, there's 25 young guys, or whatever it is, 20 guys, and they're in the middle of Afghanistan, or not in the middle, but they're on the outskirts, in the middle, and like on the border with Pakistan, in the hills, in the mountains. There's no homely comforts whatsoever that we take for granted every day. No hot water, no internet, no Wi-Fi, no TV, no girlfriends, no alcohol, no nothing, right? That like you and I just take for granted every day. No phones, no Instagram, no Facebook, whatever. No food, no chocolate. And every day it's pretty monotonous, it's get up, it's like fill up the jerry cans, clean the toilet, clean your rifle, polish your shoes, go on patrol, come back, have a shower, do whatever and repeat. And in the meantime, in the middle, they're getting attacked every other day, at night or whatever it is. So you assume that it's like this really horrible situation that these guys find themselves in. However, the interesting thing is that when these guys return back home in America and they're interviewed a year or whatever afterwards, after their posting, they actually deeply, deeply miss their time away being with like their, quotes, band of brothers, their brothers. And they say, like, I really miss being out with my tribe, having a common purpose, getting up every morning, literally getting up to survive and to do everything to survive. And it was the best time of my life. And here they are, without getting politically involved with the reasons or whatever, but they're in a war, in the hills of Afghanistan, and here are these young dudes saying that it was the best time of their life. And that was also like mentioned by Jocko Willink, who was also on the Joe Rogan podcast, who was a commander in Iraq in one of the cities that was going just like super intense fighting. And he just blatantly says, like, on the podcast, being in battle, being in war was the best time of my life, and every day I get up and I miss it. Just being with my man and having that purpose. Now, it's not so much the whole war aspect that I guess we want to talk about, but it's just the idea of like tribe. Like, what is your tribe? Who is your community?
Yes. Who
do you get up for every morning and have that purpose? So Sebastian Junger, in his book, he relates to a couple of other stories. So the other one is, I told you about it, but like the women in the cancer ward. Yeah. So these women who have cancer, which again is like obviously really tough and horrible and all that sort of stuff, and they form these really deep special bond with other women in the cancer ward, and then many of them recover and they go back home to live their normal life, and they actually miss being in the cancer ward and having that deep connection. Obviously they don't miss the cancer, but they obviously miss that bond and that getting up every day and helping each other and the purpose and so on and so forth. And then the third one, which isn't in the book or in the podcast or anything, but just something that I wanted to talk about, is the All Blacks rugby team. So that's a book, it's called Legacy, which is the author's, his name's James Kerr, and he spent also a year with the All Blacks, and he just detailed the All Blacks and their traditions and their, I guess, ethos and their team spirit, and just documented it in this amazing book. It's like an awesome book, Legacy. And he just goes through it And so the All Blacks, you could argue quite convincingly that they're the most successful team in sport, period.
Yeah.
Since like the professional era in rugby, which is like 1990 onwards, they have like a winning percentage rate of like 88%. And you think, you know, the NBA, like what's going on in the NBA and certain teams in cricket or whatever, and they're amazing teams. Their winning ratio is like 60%, and these are like the teams that win the comp. The All Blacks is 88% over like 20, 30 years.
That's ridiculous.
And so their captain, or the last captain, like this amazing player, Richie McCaw, who retired after winning the World Cup in his last game, played 143 test matches, 145, and lost 15 of them. As like an international footballer or rugby player, like an international athlete. Like, we're not talking about, you know, you versus me, or like, we're talking about other elite athletes at this superhuman level, and he just like, it's just world domination. But the book just goes through like the passion they have for the jersey, but like the whole country gets behind it. There's like the haka, and they don't play for the money. And one of the key premises from the book, one of the chapters is called Sweeping the Sheds. So after the game, you know, they celebrate or they commiserate, and they're getting rubbed down, and they're rehydrating, and they have showers, and they have the coaches talk and all that sort of stuff. And then everyone sort of cleans out and the stadium's empty. And the All Blacks, they get out their brooms and they clean the sheds, the training room.
The players do this?
Yeah. So these dudes are on like probably, you know, $500,000 or plus. And they get out and they clean their own sheds. And the whole point is, no one looks after the All Blacks. They look after themselves.
Yeah. And
they help each other. And that's how they play footy. Now, like I love my footy and stuff like that. And some of like the prima donnas in the Australian rugby world, or just other sports in general, you know, some of the Australian tennis players right now, you can just imagine like all the yes men running around cleaning up after them, all that sort of stuff. And they don't really play for anyone. They play for the money, or they play for themselves. Yeah. And they play, you know, for the fame or the fortune and that sort of stuff. But the All Blacks, like literally players have been dropped for not being team players, and like never been asked back. So the point is, like, they just have this national sense of tribe, and it's their national team, and like the economy goes down if the All Blacks lose. Now, like, that just doesn't happen in any other country in the world. And there might be a few other examples with different sports, I'm sure. But like, yeah, that the All Blacks is just this amazing tribe. So yeah, and then just to tie it up into my own life, like I look back at my time at school, and only in hindsight do I actually realize this. But like, I really enjoyed my time at school, and like I got more than happy to say that, and loved my school and all that sort of stuff, and I really bought into the culture, and got into sport, and, you know, would play with my team and cricket, and would go along and cheer the athletes running at the, you know, athletics carnival and all that sort of stuff. But like, what's actually going on? It's the idea of like my school tribe, and my school community, and that was one of like the awesome things of my school. In hindsight, it wasn't necessarily learning Shakespeare or English, or going on certain, you know, excursions or anything like that. It was my friends and that school community and that school sense of spirit. So I guess to tie it all up, like, what is your tribe? Where can you access tribe? And I think the ultimate answer is your family, or your adopted family in some way or some form or another. So yeah, sorry, just to sort of, I guess, lay the foundation for this whole conversation. Yeah. Sorry, bud, to keep talking. Do not, please keep going. This is if the audience finds this interesting as I am. This is good. So, in 2017, you know, we live in this society, and this is like being one of the common themes of our conversations, where we can, or a lot of us, sort of struggle for purpose. I think that's one of the themes of our conversations, like I just said. And also, a lot of us feel disconnected, and, you know, you can look at all the statistics out there if you really want to get into it, and, you know, drugs and alcohol dependence, and, you know, medication and suicide rates and all that sort of stuff. Because people are, you know, they're unhappy, they don't have a sense of meaning or a sense of purpose, and therefore they try and find these things in the sense of purpose in these other things or other vices. or addictions, unfortunately. And, you know, you could be a successful person today financially. And it's really interesting how society pushes you to be financially successful. And you could be in London right here, or Melbourne, or Sydney, or America, wherever you might be in the world, and go throughout your entire day and not actually talk to anyone or have like an actual heart-to-heart conversation.
Yeah.
You know, especially if you're like single or whatever, or you're living by yourself or whatever it is, let alone week or month or whole year. You know, there are people in the world that go through their entire year. You know, they probably go to work, they have their, like a few colleagues, you know, maybe they work in IT, they jump on their computer, they go home and repeat. And that's just such a disconnect for how humans have been programmed over tens of thousands of years. All right, so this comes back to me. You know, we talked about spirituality and religion in a couple of our conversations, or just wisdom. So where do you find wisdom? And you look at people in the past that were really, really wise. That's just like a starting point.
Yeah.
You know, you can spend 50 years of your life trying to find it and develop it, or just read some texts from the wisest people whose messages have lasted for thousands or hundreds of years. And the same message goes to how did people live successfully in the past? And they lived successfully and they managed to pass on their genes to us by living in this tribal society.
Yeah.
And, you know, at the end of the day, we are social primates. And the chimpanzee, or, you know, the Australopithecus, whatever it was called, or the Neanderthal, or the original humans, if you didn't live with your tribe and you got kicked out of your tribe, you'd last a week. You know, in the wild, you'd last a week. You didn't survive. And those people didn't, or those people, or those chimpanzees, or whatever it is, didn't get to pass on their genes. So it's actually like a core survival mechanism. To live in a social community is how we have managed to survive, and it's part of like the human evolution and who we are today. And the point is that I wanted to make is that we've kind of lost maybe some of that connection to the social tribe that humans and primates have been part of for millions of years.
Yeah.
So just for last minute, but you know, what happened in these tribal communities all around the world. Now you can look at Native America, Aboriginal Australia, the Amazon jungle, the Kalahari Desert. These tribes had no connection with each other, didn't know how they lived or whatever, but they all had similar sort of purposes and roles and ideologies and all that sort of stuff. And so these traditional roles, like men would sort of, you know, they would get up, and what's their purpose? Well, to gather food, or to protect their tribe, or their family members, to protect their tribe. And they would go off hunting or whatever it is. And, you know, just imagine going off hunting with 5 or 6 of your best friends, or your brothers, or your father, or whoever it is. That's like an immense like bond and love that you would have.
Yes.
And then when you come home in the afternoon with, you know, that animal or whatever it is over your shoulder, your fish, whatever it is, you can imagine how rewarding and spiritually, I don't even know spiritually, but just like how self-satisfying and rewarding that feeling would be when you're coming over the hill with that catch with you. And it's the same with the women, you know, like they would get up every morning, what's my role? And this is unfortunately something which has been super disconnected in, you know, modern society. But traditionally, they raised the children, you know, the grandmothers and the mothers, you know, they looked after the tribe and everything that needed to be done, and they raised kids. And that's like the most important role in society, as far as I'm concerned, raising healthy, happy children for the next generation. And we've just like completely lost touch with that. You know, we throw kids in daycare center to some stranger for minimum wage, and you pick them up at 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Well, that's the question.
Stuff like that.
That's the question I wanted to ask you, because I think that's a really good point. It's pretty clear, I think, when you compare how things were however many hundreds or thousands of years ago, when, you know, tribes, or I guess even in certain parts of the world right now, the tribes that still function like what it is that you're explaining, it sounds like it's really beneficial to people's lives, even if it might be hard work. The fact that they've all got a role to play is it's empowering. They've got a reason to get up in the morning. But I mean, you look at where we are, and you mentioned here in London, and the fact is that a lot of us are just really disconnected, and a lot of us do go days, weeks, months, years without really having any social group or just a core group of people that we can associate ourselves with. But what do you actually think it is that's caused that massive disconnect? Because obviously a lot of the produce and things that we're getting given now, we can just go to the shops to buy our meat. We don't have to go and hunt it. We don't need people to be able to hunt it. Where has this disconnect come from? Where has this tribe sort of dissipated and people started going about things a little more on their own?
Oh man, that's such a deep, I think, complicated question, to be honest. I'm really not 100% sure. Partly, I would argue, and I really need to research, but I'm just going to throw a couple of ideas out there and see where they land. But a lot of it has to do with the disconnection with religion. And now look, what your views are religion, it's purely up to you. I'm not going to preach or anything like that. But what happened is that what is religion? And now all religions, and Christianity essentially, supported the idea of getting married and having a family. And that's one of the core pillars of the church. And with the idea, with the Enlightenment period and the scientific revolution and all that sort of stuff, and people like Charles Darwin and the theory of evolution and other philosophers who kind of pulled apart religion and criticized it and kind of got the whole atheist movement started. Today, you just look around and people are less and less religious. Religion doesn't really necessarily have a part to play in our secular Western world as it does in other communities in other parts of the world. That's just interesting. The fact that we've lost touch with that, I guess, meaning and purpose and religion. You just follow hedonism or whatever else, and what's replaced religion, and unfortunately, is the state to a certain extent, and it just doesn't. It kind of fails to sort of. The state's not really interested in having strong families. The state's interested in taxpayers and whatever. It's a long conversation to sort of get into and stuff like that. But I think that's maybe one aspect. And just. Look, tribes still exist today, and I don't mean in the jungle. I'm talking about in cities. What are the tribes? What is your tribe? How can you start engage in a tribe and get involved in a tribe? So maybe we can talk about that for the next 5 minutes. But I'd mentioned school 5 minutes ago. Some people have their their fitness thing, their CrossFit gym, and that idea of tribe and that sort of passion. Other people, they have their dance community or whatever it is. Some people have their yoga thing or their book club, the mothers meeting, whatever it is, just their friends, your neighbors. These tribes still exist. It's just a matter of kind of, I guess, maybe getting back and sort of reconnecting with it slightly. Yeah,
let me just backtrack for a minute, because I think one thing that keeps coming to my mind through this conversation is Dan Buettner's book, The Blue Zones, where he looks at the longest, healthiest lived lives in areas all around the world. And, he looks at food and he looks at diet and he looks at exercise habits and things like that. But one thing that he looks at is this sense of tribe that these communities have. And I think even more than just a sense of purpose, Dan Buettner argues that a life of longevity or a long, healthy life, it's essential to have these tribes. It's essential to have these friendship groups and just these places where we feel we have some sense of belonging. And one of the groups is in Sardinia, I think just off the coast of Italy. If you're a geography teacher, you're going to be able to help me there. Just off the coast of Italy. And I was watching it today, and it was following a family of people living in Sardinia who were all over the age of 95. So there was about 10 people ranging from 95 to 106 or whatever. And it had footage of them and their diet and everything, but it also had footage of their sort of bi-weekly catch-up where they go and play pool and they laugh and they chat, they argue. And it was just really interesting to see how much of a place this had in their life. And it's really nice. And I think I noticed this myself playing football a couple of years ago back in Australia. It does on a personal level, on a space where I can really understand what you're saying. Has a huge impact when you're welcomed into a community. You do play your role, and I think to sort of pull ourselves out of that, or not even consider the value that can come with a community like that, it sort of not only just does us a disservice day to day, but it sounds as though it has really strong health impacts.
Totally, mate. Totally. Another example, I think Malcolm Gladwell talks about in one of his books, might be Outliers, and he talks about the community of Little Italy in New York, and very similar sort of things. So in terms of this community, these people, like health-wise and health-conscious, they actually are quite unhealthy, and they eat heaps of pasta, and they drink, and they sometimes smoke, and all this sort of stuff. But they have a really high life expectancy. And Malcolm Gladwell looked into it, and one of the reasons is because of this strong sense of this community. And the elderly, the grandparents live with the parents and the families, and they all live together, and they all have the restaurant and the cafe, and they work together and that sort of stuff. So you have these old people that get up and they're really excited, or they have purpose in the morning. And unfortunately, to touch on the whole old people thing, which we haven't raised just yet, but tribes in the past, on the plains of North America or Australia, whatever it is, old people used to be the elders in society, and their wisdom was just like, they were the respected, the elders, the wise ones, and they would help raise the kids and govern society and pass on the laws and the Dreamtime stories and all that sort of stuff. And today, what do we do with our elderly? We're such a youth-obsessed society.
This is so true.
And our elderly are kind of just pushed away into retirement homes, and it's like, oh, what do you know, old man, or whatever it is. And they're kind of just disregarded.
Yeah.
And it is kind of sad. Whereas perhaps if we did all live together, and you see this when you go traveling to different parts of the world, and you see these people. Like 100-year-old little Chinese woman or whatever, like still, shifting in the rice paddy. And what's she doing? Well, she lives in that community. They all live together in the same house and so on and so forth.
Yeah. I think on that, Tony Robbins speaks about, I think it's a Japanese word called ikigai. I could be absolutely destroying the word.
Yeah, I'm sure you are.
I'm sure I am. I'm not even going to pretend that I know how to say it in Japanese.
As I sip out of my sake.
And your neighbour... What's he doing?
I don't know what's going on, mate.
There's something going on next door if you can hear that. I'm not too sure. Everything's okay in here. But
Podcast
anyway,
life.
This ikigai,
Podcast kitchen life.
this word that I'm announcing absolutely perfectly, it looks at this whole idea of what we're speaking about, getting up and having a purpose for our day. And apparently it's really strong in the Japanese culture that the elderly, or the people who are living to quite a long age, are these people who, as soon as they wake up, they've got their passion, they've got their reason for being out of bed. And I think this is a whole nother aspect of the conversation. And I know we're I guess this is going more in line with, speaking about our passions and things like that. But I think for us to be able to try and find a blend between, where a passion meets a community, it can add a whole heap of value to our life. And I speak to so many people here, a city of 9 or 10 million, and it's crazy how many people are just lonely. And I get it as well. I mean, some days I'll sit at home and I'll work on my blog or my podcast or whatever it is I'm doing all day. And then it might be 2 or 3 o'clock and I haven't spoke to anyone. Jessie's gone to her work, and I always notice this sense of, I just feel flat. I feel a little mellow. And it takes me half an hour to warm up and actually want to talk to anyone.
Yeah, totally, man. That's like a really cool point. Like, that's one of the lessons that I've learned from my time here in London. I can happily say, not happily say, but looking back and moving overseas for 2 years, and some of the wisdom that I've gained has been like the fact that I miss my family and my mates. Which is natural, it's completely totally natural sort of feeling. I'm not crying myself to bed or anything like that, but now that I guess like winding down, or like maybe in 6 months' time I'm gonna head home. I'm actually really, really looking forward to it, and my mum and sister who were just here, and I had like a really cool time with them. But the point is, being away from my friends and my family, like my tribe. I know what you mean. Like, you're kind of sitting at something like every now and then, if I'm not hanging out with you or mates or my roommates, and you have that odd sort of lonely walk, or you're just sitting in your room watching, your telly or some sort of series or whatever. It's kind of like, man, this kind of sucks. I wish I could see my, my best mate right now. Or I wish I could see Minty right now. I wish I could see, just go hang out and have dinner with my folks, as much as, even how annoying they can be sometimes. But yeah, it's one of the big lessons that I've learned from being overseas, and something that when I go back, I'll actually really, really, really appreciate. Because I remember being back in Sydney, and it's kind of like, every now and then you'd go home for family dinner. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, go home for family dinner. And Mum's like, how are you? And you're like, yeah, good, whatever. But now, like, like those moments are like amazing. Like when you actually have dinner with your loved ones or your best mates and you catch up and you know, I'm definitely not going to have my phone out and all that sort of stuff, like to actually just treasure those moments. And I think that's, you know, one of those, the cliche, but it's one of those joys of life where you just with your best mates, there's no agenda, there's no there's no money involved or whatever, and you're just having a good time and having a laugh and, you know, just catching up. And yeah, sorry, just to add to that, like you know, what are we talking about? We're talking about like family also at the end of the day. And I guess maybe it's just as a sign that I'm getting a little bit older and wiser and mature and stuff like that. Yeah, but
better
man, like, cheers, bud. I still say I got 5 more years. You know what I mean? Till I hit my prime. But anyway,
I got asked for ID by an alcohol today. That's not the story. I'll tell you about that later.
Yeah, tell me later.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about it. But the idea is like, I guess I really am excited now to hopefully start my own family, maybe in the next whatever many years. And I never really thought about that maybe even 5 years ago. And I think that's just like such a lost message, and a message maybe I want to throw out there for this podcast as a important message. Like, do you really want to, you know, work at some okay job until you're 35 or 40? And yeah, sure, you might get a pay raise and all that sort of stuff. But man, like, that's not what life's about. It's about family, really. Seriously, man. It's about family and sharing those experiences. And, you know, don't worry about sort of earning money and stuff like that. It's like, if you got a little bit of money, just, you know, you'll be okay. Like, you know, how many families that, our friends, kids that were a complete accident, their parents were 18 or whatever. Yeah. But people survive and they get through and they do. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, you know.
Best mistake my dad ever made.
Mate, like, you're never going to be ready for kids. You just got to get it done, or you just got to start, or you just whatever. And yeah, like, there's a study, people's like top 5 regrets on their deathbeds.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And no one says, "Oh, I wish I worked more." The number one, I'm pretty sure from memory, is I wish I spent more time with my family. Yeah, so it's something I definitely, when I go back, I'm definitely going to treasure and appreciate.
Yeah,
times 1,000.
Oh man, 100%. I totally feel where you're coming from, and I think one of the things that stands out to me, and it's just on what you were saying then about, you know, what we're going to value on our deathbed, is a lot of people in the self-help scene really like this idea of, you know, what would you want your loved ones to say in your eulogy? And I think if people out there are really struggling to figure out, okay, well, where do I actually find value and, you know, a sense of purpose or whatever, like, the fact that we have that foresight to be able to think, okay, how would I like to be remembered, or how would I like the people who I care most about to remember me? And I think when you actually put yourself in that frame of mind, just rather than getting caught up in the day-to-day stresses, which obviously we do from time to time, it becomes really clear where it is that we would like to dedicate a bit more time. And like you, the top of my list is my family. And I know that on a personal level as well. I mean, I've been married for 6 years now. I've been with Jessie for nearly 10. And I say that because I think that sense of community, that sense of tribe, and yeah, we still have our highs and lows. We argue, and she's usually right. I never tell her. And then we come out the other side of that. But I think through that you grow and you develop and you've got a good friendship. And it's just nice to have a partner in crime. It's nice to, you know, and this whole sense of purpose and this whole sense of tribe, it comes out as well, just in the different things that we're talented at and interested in and actually do around the house. Like, she might cook the dinner, I've got to do the dishes. And it's just cool to see how you can partner up like that. And I know, just from experience, that if I didn't have that, I definitely feel like my life is, you know, I find a lot more meaning, a lot more depth to it than what I did. It's good to have someone to challenge you as well, because I often just think, I assume I'm right the way I see the world, but to have someone to share your ideas with and just be told that's bullshit is totally challenging, but also helpful. Yeah.
I just had an interesting thought. But essentially, like, our grandparents, I think my gran was like 1 of 10. I'm pretty sure. She was like 1 of 8 or 9 or 10. Now, just imagine, how crazy, but how fun and amazing that crazy childhood would have been. And all your brothers and sisters and their friends and birthdays and coming around and, you know, probably out, and, you know, I know it's a different time and stuff like that. But that was the fertility rate of our grandparents' generation. You know, it was 3 or 4 or 5 kids.
Cheeky boys.
Yeah, but you can just imagine how awesome that would have been.
100%.
And then our parents' generation as well. the fertility rate was whatever, like maybe 3 or so, or something like that. And still, there's that sense of tribe and family values and all that sort of stuff. And, I love listening to my dad's stories of, when he was running around the neighborhood and kicking the soccer ball and riding around with these, I think he had like 4 or 5 cousins with their bicycles and causing chaos and all that sort of stuff. And I had a pretty cool childhood as well in terms of that. Like, it wasn't sheltered or anything like that. But what's going on today, like in 2017, the fertility rate is like 1.7 or whatever it is in the Western world. Like, literally just these bunch of kids sort of being the single child. They're kind of kept indoors, they're on screens potentially. I'm being quite negative, but like, that's not an over exaggeration. And you can see how happiness has actually decreased since like the 50s or whatever, what I was saying with our grandparents having 10 siblings. Now, yeah, sure, you probably would have struggled for ends meet and, had baked beans and toast 4 or 5 nights a week. But I reckon that would have been so much fun. And the stories you would have had and the mischief and the life, like the richness and all that sort of stuff. Well, it's just being a single child, on the iPad. What's that about? You know what I mean? Like, and I don't know, it's just an interesting sort of conversation, I think.
And it is. I think the older you get as well, I start to find myself reflecting on like my happy little childhood memories. And honestly, none of my happy childhood memories ever revolving around a screen. You know what? Like, there's a very rare exception where I might remember watching a movie with a mate.
Friends.
It's always out building jumps for our bikes. It's always out just causing mischief together. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
I think that's a really interesting point. But before we wrap it up, but it doesn't have to be a long conversation. I think I just like the idea of this being an encouragement to people who might be feeling lonely or might be feeling as though they're just going at it a little bit tough. Now, I think it's one of those things that you would never even realise that you're dealing with if no one had told you. I mean, this Sebastian Junger documentary podcast with Joe Rogan, from a couple of weeks ago, it opened my eyes completely to this. And I think he put words to thoughts that I had, but I had no idea. I don't think I would have realised it without him, obviously. And I think for me, it's sort of woken me up to the fact that, hey, I've actually been speaking to our mate Reed about potentially joining like a little boxing class or something.
Yeah, sure.
Just to have that little group around, just to be able to, do exactly what we've been talking about in this podcast.
Yeah,
and
totally.
for anyone else out there who might be struggling, feeling lonely, I guess it could be a great option for them to consider where they could find that community.
Well, not even lonely, but just that sense of purpose and that drive. And that's one of the things in my late 20s that I actually really have missed a lot, was when I was playing sport in my earlier 20s. And like I stopped playing footy and cricket because it was time consuming and I didn't want to get injured and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But that's not actually what it was all about. It's not so much about the actual sport. It was just about being with my mates.
Yeah.
And I look back at some of the nights that I had out and the pub crawls and just sitting on a Saturday at cricket and just talking crap on the boundary. Like, it was just so enjoyable. And that was my tribe for a good 10 years, was playing sport. So yeah, look, and there's 1,001 different things out there and different tribes and communities and things like that. So yeah, I guess just to finish it up, just encourage people to, if you're a little bit dissatisfied or discontent, try and find that purpose, potentially through tribe.